Is there still brotherly love in Philly? We're about to find out very soon, I think. What's up? It's EJ Stewart, Tommy Beer coming at you with another edition of Orange and Blue Bloods, a New York Knicks podcast, and Audacy WFAN original. We got plenty to talk about on the show. We will go in depth with the saga going on in Philadelphia, where Joel Embiid had to clear the air with President Daryl Morey about his intentions, whether or not he wants to stay in Philadelphia. Apparently recommitted to the Sixers. Daryl Morey went on local radio saying that Joel Embiid did that and that their plan is to move forward with Joel on the team, while there still remain murmurs that the Knicks are lining up their assets and are ready to make a move if indeed Joel Embiid eventually comes up on the trade block. So we have some new reporting on all of that coming out these last few days. We'll talk about that. We'll also talk about some early over and under win totals. We got plenty of them coming out from Vegas, and the Knicks win total interesting in my eyes, and whether they have the number at right now. We'll give you guys our thoughts, and I ask Tommy whether or not this number is too high or too low. And finally, we'll do another week in Knicks history, the end of Linsanity in New York. Jeremy Lin this week, about 11 years ago, left the Knicks to go to the Houston Rockets in a also very dramatic saga that went down 11 years ago. So we'll talk about all that and more right after this.
If your blood runs orange and blue, this is the pod for you. You're listening to Orange and Blue Bloods, hosted by EJ Stewart and Tommy Beer. Let's get to it, New York.
So Tommy Beer joins me as always. Tommy, how you feeling? What's going on? And how you doing this beautiful Thursday we record?
Yeah, got a little sunshine out here in New York, so enjoying that. And little Knicks to talk about. The rest of the drama, it seems like the league's kind of on hold until we get some clarification on the particularly Harden and Dame Lillard situations. But kind of tied up in that Harden business is the future of Joel Embiid, which is somebody we've talked about in the past few days, few weeks, few months, and somebody will probably continue to talk about, although it sounds like Daryl Morey at least is convinced that Joel Embiid is happy in Philly. So why don't you give us a little bit of an update on that?
Yes, we will. So let's get right to it. So again, this is Orange and Blue Bloods, a New York Knicks podcast, and Audacy WFAN, an original podcast you can get wherever you get your podcasts, including the free Audacy app. Make sure you hit that auto download feature on your streaming service so you get these episodes every time we drop. And of course, make sure you check us out on YouTube as well, where you can catch our full episodes on the WFAN channel. So, Sixers star and league MVP Joel Embiid has reassured team president Daryl Morey that he is committed to the team after comments made during an interview raised questions about whether or not he would soon request a trade from Philadelphia. So he was speaking with Maverick Carter at the Uninterrupted Sports Film Festival, and this is what Joel had to say.
I just want to win a championship, whatever it takes. I don't know where that's going to be, whether it's in Philly or, everywhere else. I just want to have a chance to accomplish that. I want to see what it feels like to win that first one and then you can think about, the next one. It's not easy, but, it takes more than, 1, 2, 3 guys. Gotta have, good people around you. And, like myself, every single day I work hard to, be at that level so I can produce and make it happen. So
it was the part where he said, I want to win a championship. Well, whether that be in Philadelphia or anywhere else, that raised a lot of eyeballs. Also, I wanted to make sure I played the full quote in his contract. You hear him talking about, it takes more than one person, takes multiple people. Kind of echoing comments he made after they lost to Boston, also, which also raised a lot of eyebrows. And then that Game 7 loss they had to the Celtics. So that was a full context of Joel's comments. Now he has since walked back those comments. He's gone on Twitter saying he essentially was trolling. And now, according to Ian Begley, according to people that have talked to him, he says that he has met with Morey and head coach Nick Nurse to state his commitment to the team and his goal to play for one franchise for his entire career. Morey then also, reaffirmed that that conversation did happen sometime over the last few days. So, meanwhile, the Knicks, who sit back with a treasure trove that includes 4 tradable unprotected picks, 3 first-round protected picks, 3 pick swaps available, They wait for essentially the right star and the right fit to put next to Jalen Brunson. According to Knicks writer Fred Katz of The Athletic, the Knicks are taking this approach about any prominent player that they consider acquiring. Quote, does he fit with Brunson? If the answer is no, then he's not worth the massive return it takes to acquire him. Apparently, the Zach LaVine conversations didn't go very far because the price was too high from Chicago. Apparently, the Knicks have expressed no interest in Karl Anthony Towns. Both of those nuggets coming from Katz. Katz notes that Embiid is seen by the Knicks as a perfect fit given his ability to play pick and roll, defend the rim, dominating the post while still being a 29-year-old player in the prime of his career. So, Tommy, on the Philly side, are you convinced Philly can do enough to keep Joel Embiid happy given where they're at right now? As of right now, it seems like he's committed to them, but this Harden situation looks tenuous to say the least.
Yeah, and in any situation, any relationship between a star player and the franchise, as we've learned, especially in this age of empowerment, however you want to, kind of characterize it. A lot of LeBron is, commonly, credited, depending on if you want to give him credit or blame on the
Right.
on this new day and age in the NBA in which superstars are no longer committed. In years of past, Malone, his whole career with the Jazz, Patrick, essentially his whole career with the Knicks, of course, and the other superstars of that era, Reggie Miller in Indiana, etc. There obviously wasn't as much movement among the top 5, 10, 20, all NBA type players. Whereas nowadays, it's shocking if a player does, last more than, beyond 2 contracts with one team. When he's an elite player, and that's because teams are no longer players no longer feel beholden to franchises. They've understood the dynamics, the economics of the sport, that they're expendable. Obviously the Isaiah Thomas case in Boston, and his career was never the same after leaving it all out there, literally on the floor for the Celtics, and his contract, and then getting traded to Cleveland, etc. Has never been the same player since. So because of that, do I think things have calmed down? Yes. I don't think they were at a boiling point, despite Embiid's kind of offhanded comments. But as we talked about, it sometimes that kind of sparks something that a player's unhappy, and now he has the opportunity to speak out. So maybe that could lead to more comments. I don't think anyone was expecting him to come out, this week and say, I'm never playing for the Sixers again. But,
Right.
Again, it's something to keep an eye on. It looks like they've kind of calmed the waters there a little bit. But again, so much is dependent upon James Harden. Because there's basically 2 ways this plays out. If they don't, right now it sounds like Harden has his eyes set on the Clippers. The Clippers actually, it sounds like are unwilling to trade Trey Mann and future draft capital for Harden, which tells you a lot about Harden at this stage.
Yeah, where he's at this point in his career, exactly.
How valuable other teams consider him. There's obviously, if another team thought, oh my God, James Harden, the MVP James Harden was available, there'll be teams lining up. That's no longer the case. But he's obviously an important player on the Sixers. Second leading scorer, led the team in assists. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. Should he remain with the Sixers? Morey's basically, it's important to note here that Morey's pitched, and I'm sure this is what he reiterated in conversations this week, is listen, I don't want to say we're going to get through this year, but let's look ahead. We're obviously going to compete for a championship. We're going to put ourselves in the best position to compete for a championship. If we play well in the 4th quarter of Game 6, maybe we're in the NBA Finals. Last month. So there's a lot there, even when we're not at our peak, efficiency. That being said, Morey's is reminding Embiid to look ahead. 12 months from now, in the summer of 2024, the Sixers are in a great position to have maximum cap space available. Tobias Harris contracts comes off the books, as does James Harden's, obviously, assuming he's opted in. He has 1 year left. They keep him and they let that contract expire, and they don't have to re-sign Tyrese Maxey until after they bring in free agents. So they could theoretically get a max player, maybe 2 max players, depending on how they kind of cook the books.
Yeah.
And they could trade out some expendable contracts, sign and trade, things along those lines, and then surround Embiid and Maxey as your two cornerstones with another third superstar. So that's kind of Morey's pitch. I'm sure that's what he sold Embiid on. Embiid is aware of this. He understands this. Is he willing to wait another year? Is he willing to wait another year and a month? In other words, let's see what Morey does in free agency. Can he bring in the superstar he's kind of been promising me or hinting at that he's going to surround me with? We'll see how all that plays out. So, I think it's likely that he at least gives the Sixers a full year. But again, we'll reassess. We'll take his temperature in December when the Knicks play the Sixers at the Garden. Does he have any confidence? When the Sixers lose 4 in a row and James Harden doesn't show up to practice one day and Nick Nurse is riding his starters too hard and there's friction, does Embiid make some noise? We'll see. But the most likely scenario is it's kind of status quo for the next year or so, and then we'll reassess. But as you know, stranger things have happened.
Yeah, I think we could be walking into what may be Joel Embiid's most challenging year as a Sixer, which I think is going to make the season very interesting because we know what a situation is like when James Harden is unhappy and still on the team. I mean, it becomes an absolute untenable environment. We saw that in Houston. We saw that in Brooklyn. So if the Sixers are going to, basically say, hey, we're going to just keep Harden until we get exactly what we want, and to me, it's very clear that James Harden is just to a lot of NBA teams not worth a superstar kind of package or a superstar kind of contract. That's why James Harden opted in. He could have very well opted out of his contract and tried to find a team that would have signed to a max deal or a team that would have been able to try to swing a sign and trade. And basically, there was no money out there for him, at least not the money that he thinks he would deserve. So he had no choice, but if he wanted that $40 million this year to take that money and then hope that somehow a deal could be swung. But right now things aren't going in his favor. So you got the Harden situation where you don't know what's going to happen. Even if he does get traded, now you're talking about bringing in 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 new players into your team. Now you're trying to build chemistry. You have a brand new coach who's trying to implement his own system. And then you have this hanging thing about, Joel Embiid and the clock ticking on him winning a championship. Like a lot of people have been behind Joel Embiid in terms of that him versus Jokic thing, saying that, hey, Embiid is just as good, if not better. He plays defense, and you can't keep crowning a guy like, Jokic when he hasn't won anything. Well, Jokic has won something. Now people are looking at Embiid and say, well, hey, we were the guy that we were, championing you as maybe the best center. How come you haven't won anything, So, it's going to be, I think, a challenging season. I think the Sixers could be in a bad spot, which then will force Embiid to eventually have to make a decision. Is he going to decide, hey, you know what, this thing is working out by the end of next season, and then he decides to make a trade? Do they switch? Who knows what happens at that point? But I think that this is going to be potentially a tough go of it for the Sixers, and that's a great spot to be in for the Knicks. Not just because you may want Joel Embiid in the future, but I mean, this is a team that was ahead of you in the standings in your conference. So the Knicks have an opportunity to potentially move up if the Sixers do have a down year and things don't work out the way they hope. Maybe the Knicks are the team looking at themselves saying, hey, now we're the 4th seed. Maybe we're the 3rd seed. We'll talk about the win totals in a minute. But this situation in Philly, I think, is very close to follow on multiple fronts.
Yeah, it's a good point. And, a lot of it obviously gets talked regarding Harden, his exit from Houston, coming to camp out of shape, going to strip clubs and parties and when all that kind of drama went down before the trade to Brooklyn. But you're right. A lot, people kind of forget that he forced his way out of Brooklyn too, under, really not pretty circumstances.
They had lost like 10 games in a row or something crazy during that stretch. They were playing awful basketball, and he was like just mailing it in basically for a month.
I just called up his Basketball Reference game log from that season. So this is February 2nd, 2022. What would ultimately be his final game as a Net. Played 37 minutes, scored 4 points on 2 of 11 shooting. He didn't play the next night. I forget what it was. He's, whether he said it was a hamstring or an ankle.
Hamstring was tight or something.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Lo and behold, he gets straight to the Sixers. His first game at Philly, 27, 12, and 8.
Yeah.
So he found the fountain of youth, I guess, somewhere on 95 on his way out to Philly. Yeah, I mean, so that kind of, again, and you're right. I forgot that part of the story too. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 straight losses.
Yeah.
That was in the middle of
Yeah.
an 11-game losing
It's
streak.
crazy.
So
And
yeah,
that was with Kyrie Irving playing half the games, and
Yep.
then they actually I believe they had like a road trip at that point. So Kyrie actually played a lot of those games. They lost in a row. Both of those guys playing together, they had no chemistry. Harden seemed like he wanted nothing to do with Kyrie, and they were an absolute mess. So Philadelphia, that's what you have waiting in store for you if you decide to bring an unhappy James Harden back.
Yeah, that's almost the best case scenario, that he decides to show up for camp, that he decides
Right.
to,
Yeah.
like it could be worse.
Yeah, because in Houston, he basically was, he was going to party with little baby during training camp while practices were happening in Houston. I mean, Daryl Morey's playing with a lot of fire right now.
And then you got Nick Nurse isn't the kind of coach that can, laugh off stuff like that. He's going to try to come in and be, maybe set an example, and so one of those, they're going to butt heads, and it could get ugly if there's a scenario there that things get really ugly. Again, that doesn't mean Embiid's definitely going to leave, but things could definitely go south with Harden.
Yeah, and if that goes south with Harden, that almost will certainly affect, like I said, the win-loss record for Philly. And even if Joel Embiid decides he is going to stick it out for the whole year, whatever, again, that's good for the Knicks, because that's a team that is in your division, team that you're going to be competing with for playoff positioning, and you could be in a great spot moving forward to make a run here if Philly struggles. What do you think about the Knicks' approach and the stuff said by Fred Katz, essentially saying that the Knicks are waiting for the right star? They're not going to trade for some of these other stars that they deem good, but players that don't fit. Like they had no interest in Karl-Anthony Towns, which, shouldn't be that surprising, but given his relationship with Leon Rose, I think to some people it would be. And at the Zach LaVine thing, they really didn't have much interest in either, because the Bulls' asking price was too high. The Knicks deeming Embiid that perfect fit. What do you think of that?
Yeah, real quick, and I'll answer that in a second. Do you have the over-unders? What's Philly's over-under? Have they?
So that's a good, interesting question. So there are a couple of books that actually haven't even listed them yet, because they want to see what happens with Harden.
Just because there's so much uncertainty there.
Yeah, I saw there are a few that have them at 40. The few that do have them at 49.5.
Ooh, that's a high number for that.
Yeah, and the only 2 books that I saw that even have them listed.
Right,
So that told me that perhaps maybe they were the outlier that suggested maybe they shouldn't have had them that high, given all the issues they're dealing with.
Interesting. And we'll talk about the Knicks over under in a minute here.
Yep.
As far as to directly answer your question about the Knicks approach, it's such a pleasant relief, such an encouraging sign. I wrote about it at length at the start of this offseason after the Knicks got eliminated, essentially. 2 articles specifically entitled, "No, the Knicks should not trade for Karl-Anthony Towns," and "No, the Knicks should not trade for Zach LaVine." This kind of circles back to the and we talked about it in the previous pod earlier this week about Jalen Brunson, the 1-year anniversary, and how that changes the entire kind of landscape, the just the entire feel of the organization and the franchise. And not just because, as you know, one of the reports in the Athletic article, and Katz's Athletic article, was they want somebody that'll fit well with Brunson, but just the fact that they have Brunson, whether you want to call him a superstar, an elite superstar, a star, he's a very, very, very good player who's played even better in the postseason. I was looking at numbers. I'm going to write about it for my post tomorrow. Just kind of talk about the 1 year, basically contrasting the state of the franchise this morning as opposed to 12 months ago, the day that they Wednesday was the introductory press conference for Brunson. And obviously the upgraded point guard position, but just kind of the feel of the organization. In years past, the Knicks would have felt a ton of pressure to trade for Karl-Anthony Towns. Yes, he's a bit, he's not a great defender. His contract's bad, but he's a star. He's an all-star.
Right. Yeah.
He's a really good player. He can score a lot of points. Maybe he'll be very good. Zach LaVine's like won a slam dunk contest. He'll sell a lot of jerseys. He'll get people to tune in on MSG. So maybe they roll the dice for him. Nowadays, that's no longer the deciding factor. It's does that player fit in alongside the other star player that we have on the roster, who's locked into a great contract. So I just think it's very encouraging from a franchise standpoint that the Knicks front office feels comfortable enough. They don't have pressure from management. They don't have pressure from the fan base to do something short-sighted. They really have stuck to their goals. They've accumulated all this assets, and they're only going to push their chips into the middle of the table for that perfect piece. And I think it's great news.
Yeah, in many ways, it's like, the trade for Zach Randolph, or the trade for Steve Francis, or the trade for Anthony McDyess, Tracy McGrady, like these kind of guys that normally the Knicks would go for. They would say, hey, we need to make a big splash. We need to make a move here. So even though there's a lot of reasons why we probably shouldn't do this, like here, we're going to take the swing. And, all of those were huge misses. Here you have the Knicks looking at the situation saying we don't have to make a move that doesn't put us as close to a championship as possible, which is what you want to see. A lot of times it was like, all right, let's just get ourselves to respectability, or let's get ourselves a shot to make the playoffs, or whatever. Like they're beyond that. So I like the Knicks approach. I would not have traded for Zach LaVine. I would not have traded for Karl-Anthony Towns. And that's okay. Like the Knicks have a good team. That's the thing. I think the other thing too was those teams in the past, they didn't have the luxury of actually having a watchable product to put on the floor. So there was even more pressure to say, okay, we have to do something, even if we know there are major downsides, especially making some of these moves. We have to do something. Otherwise, we could see ourselves in a position where we're, just completely irrelevant. And they actually made themselves even more irrelevant with some of these terrible moves they made because the team was worse. But like they're in a position now because they have a pretty good team, a team that looks like a perennial playoff team. They don't have to panic. And I think it's been refreshing to see that they haven't acted this way. It's also refreshing to me, and like it's interesting how the people were so wrong about like what Leon Rose's approach to running the Knicks was going to be. Like everybody that like talked about Leon's hiring said, oh, he's going to be here because he's going to try to make big trades immediately and turn his team around super fast. And he couldn't be further from the truth. So like any report about Leon Rose being, hot and heavy for any player or a certain approach that regards to Knicks being super aggressive on certain things, like I take them all at a grain of salt now because they're all wrong about how Leon Rose is going to build his team. He has shown that he was going to build his team the right way. He wasn't coming in for a quick buck or a quick fix. In many ways, this is probably James Dolan's best hiring since being a Knicks owner. I mean, I'm trying to think about it. I mean, like all the bad coaches, so many of the bad presidents. This is a president who has put the Knicks in a position to be a perennial winner, with tons of assets to continue to improve, a true upside, a true young core to build around, and respect around the NBA. I mean, Dolan has made a lot of bad hires and a lot of moves that we look back on that probably set the franchise back years. This one, we say, it's got to probably be his best one yet.
Yeah, obviously, there's. We'll see how it plays out. Do they take a step forward this year or kind of remain on that same impressive plateau? Do they take a step back after they made the playoffs? So we'll see. And there have been some missteps from
for sure.
Rose along the way. He's been by no means perfect. The Fournier signing doesn't look great now. Alex Burks,
top and pick,
and top and pick, and Derrick Rose's contract, and basically having to trade those guys, Nerlens Noel, etc. Just to clear cap space. That being said, the and you use the word refreshing, which is really important, and it's a change in philosophy. And maybe Rose did come in with telling Dolan, listen, I'm going to get you a superstar, I'm going to get you stuff, but one didn't materialize, so he pivoted correctly, and just by not doing anything stupid makes him a really good executive in contrast to the other Knicks executives. And the key being he nailed the most important signing of his tenure, which was Jalen Brunson. Whether you want to credit that for the relationship with his father or whatever the case is, they nailed it. Every team in the NBA would love to have Jalen Brunson on their team for that contract. The Knicks have him, and so that in combination with controlling your assets, keeping your young players and et cetera. Again, the Toppin situation didn't play out. We'll see if they consolidate for that turn that into a star. But so far so good, definitely for Leon Rose.
Yeah, Leon Rose got to feel good where he's at, and I think he's got to feel good with some of the chaos happening in Philly because his former client is making waves and waves that the Philly fans and Philadelphia media and the Sixers organization can't be happy about. And I know Leon Rose being a South Jersey guy himself, I know he's probably has good intel on everything going on down there in Philly. So that's going to be a situation to continue to follow. So we're still months away from the start of the regular season, but the over/under win totals have been settled in most for most sports books, and most of them, especially for the Knicks, as of today. So here's where they stand right now. So from what I saw on lines.com, Caesars Sportsbook currently has the Knicks' highest number. They are currently at 45.5 wins this season for the Knicks. Then you have FanDuel at the lowest number at 43.5. They have two of the sports books there that have Knicks at 44.5. So you're sitting somewhere between 45.5 and 43.5, where you can get the Knicks in terms of win totals for next year. Now, the Knicks, of course, surprised most of the league last year by winning 47 games. They made a surprise trip to the second round of the Eastern Conference playoffs. So Knicks had a really good season last year. They won 47 games. Here, Vegas not giving them that many wins, but in the neighborhood. So I asked you, Tommy, one, your thoughts on the Vegas projection, and on the highest number, which is 45.5. Would you go over or under where we're sitting today?
Yeah, I think that's the right number. I think that's kind of the number I would assume. If I had to guess without knowledge of what Vegas had installed the number at. A couple of things to remember. The Knicks have won more than 42 games only twice this millennium. So that's the reality of the situation.
Yeah.
That being said, the Knicks haven't had Jalen Brunson, prior to this past season. Of course, they haven't had the combination of Brunson, Randall, RJ Barrett, IQ, Grimes, Mitch Robinson, Isaiah Hartenstein, solid depth basically across the board, other than the power forward position. So I would lean towards the over. I'd rather bet the over at 43. I think the Knicks will probably land in that 44, 45, 47. Kind of the upside is 49. The downside being an injury to Randall, leaving the team really short at power forward. How would they handle that if Randall misses an extended period of time? Would definitely be challenging. At that point, do they make a trade? Do they rely on Hart as the team's starting power forward for a month if they needed to? Do they go, Sims playing alongside either Mitch Rob or iHeart at times? So those are questions I'd have to ask. As with any team, if Brunson gets hurt, that's an issue, etc.
Yeah.
I'd probably lean in the mid 40s. So I'd probably take the over as of right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think the number is fine. I think from what I saw, it left the Knicks, fourth in most books. The Sixers aren't listed in a lot of books, as I mentioned earlier. So of the teams, essentially only Cleveland, Milwaukee, and Boston had higher win totals. So 44, 43, wherever you're at, 45, that's a pretty good number. The Kings are around that same number. Several other, pretty good teams around the number. So I was cool with the number. I feel pretty bullish about the Knicks as of today in terms of the 45.5. I would go over as of today because, we talked about it in the last episode with Evan Fournier and, his belly aching about, not playing and how they've utilized him. When he went out of the rotation, the Knicks changed their entire lineup after December 4th. For the rest of the season, they went 37-22. That's a 51 win pace. Their offensive rating during that time was third in the league. They were an entirely different team from the time they benched Evan Fournier and Rose and sort of Grimes into the lineup and McBride in the rotation to what they were before that. So I look at the Knicks this season, I see a lot of teams with a lot of turnover. Maybe not so much Milwaukee and Boston per se, though Boston did add Porzingis. They got rid of Marcus Smart. That is a big move there. But a lot of these other teams, a lot of turnover. The Hawks just dumped John Collins and sent him away. The Knicks are one of the teams coming into the season that don't have a lot of major changes. They lost one guy in Obi Toppin, added Dante DiVincenzo, but otherwise that's it. Starting lineup's intact. Most of the rotation is intact. I would expect the Knicks to come in next season and get off to a really hot start. I think they'll come out really strong. They'll take advantage of some of these teams that are trying to get to know each other. And the Knicks may kind of get themselves in a position where they are one of the top two or three teams in the East to start the season just because they're the familiarity. And they'll probably come down off of a really, really high number. but could they touch 50 wins? Like, I think that's definitely on the table.
Yeah, you make a really good point in terms of continuity. NBA.com had a breakdown of largest percentage of returning rotation players. The Knicks actually lead the NBA.
There you go.
The players that logged significant minutes, I think it was more than 10 minutes or more than 12 minutes, returning on their roster this season. Obviously, the exchanging DiVincenzo for Obi Toppin is really the only change to the Knicks rotation. As of right now, obviously we're still 75 days away from training camp, actually, as of yesterday. So plenty of time for that to change, but safe to assume that will be the case. So that's definitely a pro in the over column. I'll give you one con in the over column, and this isn't Knicks specific. I think it's more of NBA in general. Last season, we had many teams that were trying to lose as many games as possible. Spurs, Rockets, Trailblazers over the second half of the season. Pistons won 17 games. They were hoping to lose as many games. The Hornets were hoping to lose as many games as possible second half of the season once Ball went down. Obviously, a lot of that had to do with Wembanyama, Scoot Henderson, Brandon Miller, etc. There is no elite once in a generation, draft pick on the horizon. There's also some pick protections with the Rockets, so they're trying to win, as evidenced by their signing of Fred VanVleet and Dylan Brooks, etc. So I think that will be a change this season, which is uncommon. Usually there's 3 or 4 teams, even in a bad draft year, you still want the number 1 overall pick. Who's going to emerge? It gives you a lot of flexibility, a lot of options. Pistons traded for veterans, Joe Harris, Monte Morris. We talked about what the Rockets did. The Spurs are going to have Wemby. The Blazers, who knows what goes on there. But assuming Dame is back and they just re-signed Jeremy Grant, the Pacers got a lot better, this offseason. I think they'll be better. We'll see what happens with the Heat and the Hawks. But, remember, the Heat won 44 games last year in the regular season.
Right.
The team obviously went, so winning 45 games is no easy feat. So that's one thing I'm going to try to keep in mind among the teams in the middle and at the top. Whereas, you may, I love the Nuggets this year. I think they're going to cruise to a championship. They may well do that, but they may win fewer regular season games than you think. Just because there's more night in, night out competition. Basically, a game against the Pistons was a bye last year. A game against the Rockets was a bye for most teams most of the season. So that's one thing to keep in mind.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the teams in the NBA, some of the worst teams in the league. I mean, trying to find the teams that are still tanking. I mean, maybe the Hornets. I don't know if they just signed the ball. I mean, I think they want to win. The Blazers are probably tanking. We know the Wizards are tanking.
Right.
But the list is short. Like, I don't think the Spurs are tanking at this point. They already got their guy. The Jazz aren't tanking, though they probably should. The Dallas Mavericks aren't tanking anymore. Like, there aren't these teams, you look in the East, there are a lot of bad teams out there, but Toronto lost their starting point guard, but hasn't traded anybody else. So it seems like they're still trying to win. You mentioned Detroit and some of the veterans they've signed. They got Cade Cunningham coming back. He's just been cleared fully for action. I saw him working out. He looks great. So the Pistons are hoping to kind of make noise this year. Orlando is not tanking at this point. Like, these teams that were automatic W's, they're going to try to win this year. Now, it may not work. They may still end up being bottom 5.
Teams, and injuries are going to cause certain teams to tank. But even the Wizards, we assumed, rightfully so, everybody in the world assumed they're going to tank their brains out once they traded Bradley Beal. Their starting 5 is Tyus Jones, decent, cost-controlled, relatively stable point guard. Jordan Poole, who's going to take 1 million shots. Corey Kispert, your Gonzaga guy. Kuzma, they signed to a $100 million contract. Yeah. Middle is weak, Gafford, Muscala, but they got Denny Avdia coming off the bench, Landry Shamet, DeLon Wright, who's a good backup. So they got good 6-7 rotation players. That's not a team that's going to lay down at any point. So this year is going to be a little bit different. That there's no just nights off. Yeah,
I think the fact that you can come to the season and say the Knicks have the 4th or 5th best win total odds, depending on where you're looking at on your sports book. I mean, it's probably been a long time since that's been the case. I bet you it probably wasn't that high. Actually, I just can't remember it wasn't that high the year after they went to the playoffs, lost to the Hawks.
54,
in that, I think the number back then, I think it was around 41. I think, because I remember thinking they were going to smash that number, and of course,
you're right.
They came nowhere close. I thought I was like, I was going to run to Vegas to handle myself personally. That's how
Yeah, that
confident
was
I was with Kemba Walker and every Fournier
yes.
being signed to the team.
That was before kind of the New York online betting, and every Knicks fan would say the same thing. Vegas is disrespecting us. I think ESPN had them like at 37 or something. And Knicks fans were furious. Yeah, that's a good point. That's right. They did not hit that number the following season.
Yeah, they were not even close. So it's so you never know how these things go. Which I think win over on the win totals are so fun to do in all sports.
Yes.
So the Knicks being in a position where again, fourth best odds in the East in terms of wins. You gotta like where you are at this point. So let's wrap the show here. We're observing another week in Knicks history, and I'm very fascinated to have this conversation because it's one that I love talking about in terms of Knicks history. So this was a controversial time. It was July 17th, 2012, that the Knicks confirmed they would not match the Rockets' offer sheet for point guard Jeremy Lin, meaning that Jeremy Lin would be signing with the Rockets. Now, it was initially reported as a 4-year, $28 million deal, but we then learned that the Rockets had actually signed Lin to a poison pill deal for over 3 years that would have had Jeremy Lin essentially making $15 million in the final year of the deal. So they backloaded the deal in hopes of making the Knicks balk at signing him to the offer sheet. The luxury implication for the Knicks would have been massive had they signed Jeremy Lin and kept him by that final year of that contract. It would have been $30 more million. Knicks would have had to spend in luxury tax payments. Dolan apparently was very furious about the fact that this was added to the contract. He thought Jeremy Lin was trying to pull a fast one over the Knicks to not get them to re-sign, and the Knicks elected eventually to not re-sign Jeremy Lin, despite him really kind of taking over the basketball world earlier that season with Linsanity. So Lin left for Houston. He never really recaptured the magic of Linsanity. He averaged 13 points per game in 2 seasons in Houston before being traded to the Lakers, and he made multiple stops in LA, Charlotte, Brooklyn, Atlanta, and Toronto. Injuries also played his career. He had some knee problems as well. Overall, decent career, averaging about 11, 12 points a game for his career, but never again that stardom that he kind of found overnight while playing for the Knicks under Mike D'Antoni. So, Tommy, looking back on it, do you think the Knicks made the right decision not matching the poison pill Lin contract 11 years later?
Yeah, I don't think they should have let it get to that point. I think it was their first mistake. I think they should have locked them up for that. And we've given Carmelo Anthony a lot of credit on this podcast. But he deserves some blame here for the way he handled the whole Linsanity mess, the situation when Linsanity came back and played well in Melo's absence. So there was definitely some tension there. I think that obviously that played a part in Dolan's reluctance and kind of the Knicks coming up with excuses not to match the contract. At the time, I thought they should have. In retrospect, I thought they should have. It turned out it didn't really hurt them. We did average 13.4 points, 6.1 assists that following season in Houston. But wasn't a bona fide star. Wasn't the guy that some people, Knicks fans feared he might become. But I thought the Knicks owed him an opportunity to either win the starting point guard spot, to kind of reignite the fan base. I think there was a lot of fans that didn't have a lot to cheer for from that really dark. I mean, there's been some dark periods, but that dark period from like 2004, 5-ish, right after the Stephon Marbury experiment flopped till the 54 win season. 9 years later, there was very little to be excited about, and Linsanity was kind of the only thing Knicks fans could hang their hats on. So I thought they owed that to him and the fan base to at least give it a shot. It wasn't going to break the books. If the worst case scenario was a luxury tax, which really would only impact James Dolan. Remember, at the CBA at the time, there's no other implications, no loss of
right.
credit.
This was no second apron era.
Correct. Exactly. This was strictly a James Dolan pocketbook issue. I would have preferred the team resigning.
Yeah, I mean, every sports fan, I feel like, or every observer in basketball or any sport, they have their thing they die on. They have their hills they die on. This is the hill I die on consistently when it comes to Knicks history. I think the Knicks made a massive mistake still in not re-signing Jeremy Lin. And I actually think that Jeremy Lin, would have become the Knicks starting point guard of the future at that point in time had he stayed with the Knicks. Now, does he deserve blame for it? Because at the end of the day, he didn't have to sign an offer sheet. I think he did a podcast saying he actually told his agent to tell, hey, Houston, can they offer less? Because I want to go back to the Knicks.
Right.
Of course, that wasn't going to be on the table. So, maybe he deserves blame. Maybe he should have handled that better. Maybe he should have came to the Knicks first. No, the Knicks, from what I remember, the Knicks said, hey, go out there and go get an offer, and we'll probably match whatever you get because we can't imagine you getting something crazy. Sure enough, he got something that they deemed to be crazy. And remember, as you mentioned, Carmelo Anthony and the praise he's gotten, and I think we've been very kind to him. I agree. I thought he handled this terribly. If you remember, he was over with in the Olympics training with Team USA, and he was asked about it, and he said, I heard Houston gave him that ridiculous contract. And that quote kind of resonated for those 7 days or however long it was. Because remember, it was a much longer time period for offer sheet. That quote resonated for 7 days, essentially, with Melo's first reaction to Lin's offer sheet was it was a ridiculous contract. And there's been plenty of talk, and we've never heard Melo's side of it, and we probably never will. Melo's kind of a private guy. I would love to hear him talk about like what he thought about Linsanity, because I've heard Tyson Chandler say he wasn't too happy with Linsanity. I've heard Iman Shumpert, I believe, go on podcast and say he wasn't too happy about Linsanity. So I don't know anybody who has come to bat saying Melo was a great teammate and a great support system for Jeremy Lin during that time. Now, maybe he can come on and defend himself and give his side of the story, but that's what we've heard from everybody. So I agree. If you're talking about Melo as a leader, as a great Knick, this was one of his darkest moments. But I think it was unfortunate. I think Lin, if he would have stayed in New York, I know they had fired D'Antoni at that point in time, but you still had Mike Woodson, who was still running a lot of Mike D'Antoni's system. And I think you would combine him with Melo coming to that next season, putting together maybe his best season as a pro. I think the Knicks would have been really good. Now, I don't know if they would have still signed Jason Kidd. I don't know if Raymond Felton would have been there. The team might have been a little different. But I think instead of that team being a one-year flash in the pan, winning 54 games and a 2 seed, I think they would have been a perennial playoff team for another 3 years at least, and would have gave themselves more bites at the apple as opposed to putting together an older, a veteran team that kind of only had one crack at it. So I still to this day feel like, I know Lin got hurt too, but I still feel to this day they would have figured out the injuries. They would have figured out everything. Everything was so perfect in New York that the fact that they couldn't hold on to him was a massive mistake.
Yeah, and the Knicks starting point guard 2013 was Prigioni. The Knicks on opening night. The Knicks starting point guard on opening night 2014, Shane Larkin.
Right.
Jose Calderon the next year. So we've
the diminished version of Jeremy Lin that we saw in these other stops would have been a better option than Larkin and Prigioni and Moutier and all these other guys we've seen over the last few years.
And Lin, obviously, handling the New York scenario is part of the gig here. And he proved, arguably more than certainly any other athlete in a short period of time, just exploding on the national scene, that he could handle what came along with it. So I agree with you. It's just a shame that he never got an opportunity for both the Knicks, himself, the fans. I'm sure if everyone kind of could do it all over again, they most would have handled it differently. But it is what it is.
Yeah. Knicks, made the mistake, I think, in thinking that, okay, Jeremy Lin's not going to get a great offer from anybody, and they put him out there. And and if you want to know about how Daryl Morey moves in any potential future in terms of Knicks Sixers deals, this is why I put this in this episode today. Also, this is a good thing to remember. He didn't remember the deal that he signed with the Rockets didn't include this $15 million at the end of the year. They got to separate that into $9 million over 2 years, essentially making it a 4-year deal for the Rockets. For the Knicks, it would have been 3 years with $15 million in the CBA, which is crazy. I don't know if that's even in the CBA anymore. I haven't seen a deal like that since. But that is how Daryl Morey moves. He is as cutthroat as it gets. He comes for the jugular. So if the Knicks are gonna get into a negotiation with Daryl Morey, just remember that this is how it's going to be. It doesn't matter how much Joel Embiid wants to be a Knick or how much he loves Leon Rose. You're dealing with a shark. And the last time the Knicks win those shark waters, I don't want to say they got bit by Danny Ainge, because it might have been good that they didn't make that trade. But at the very least, they didn't end up with the result that they hoped for. So it's just something I think to be mindful of. But shout out to Jeremy Lin. I know he's been playing overseas in China. I don't know if he retired. I feel like I remember him maybe saying he retired, or I'm not sure about that. I don't want to put that on him. But shout out to him. One of the greatest moments we've had over the last 20 years in Knicks history was the Linsanity era we saw in that January, February run he had. So great looking back on what was at the time a very heated moment in Knicks history.
Yeah.
But that's going to do it for this edition of Orange and Blue Bloods. Thank you guys again so much for checking us out. Of course, this is a podcast you can get wherever you get your podcasts, including the free Audacy app. Make sure you hit the auto download feature on your streaming service to get these episodes every time we drop. We'll have 2 more episodes next week. Want to announce here, next week, we'll expect to record on Tuesday. We should have SNY's Ian Bagley as a guest on our show next week. So that should be super exciting. So shout out to Ian Bagley. He'll be with us. We'll ask him all the questions you guys want to hear. If you want to send us over questions, feel free to tweet at me, EJ_Stewart, tweet at Tommy. But that should be really exciting. So I'm gonna make sure I get that out the way as well. And of course, you can catch the full podcast, these episodes on YouTube on the WFAN channel. So Tommy, let the people know where they can find you.
At Tommy Beer on Twitter.
And again, you can find me EJ_Stewart on Twitter, Action EJ on Instagram and TikTok. Again, thank you guys so much for checking us out. For Tommy, I'm EJ. Take it easy, guys. Peace. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. If you want to see more of our videos, be sure to check out our playlist and let us know what you think in the comments below.
Also, don't forget to follow us on social media to stay up to date on our latest podcast ventures. Links will be in the descriptions. And as always, thanks for watching, and we will see you in our next video.